Hello, Instagram Live. This is Rick Jacobs, law enforcement training and education consultants. I'm very tired today. I literally just got home 30 minutes ago. Actually, not even 30 minutes ago, like 25 minutes ago, from Arizona. Sorry, I'm trying to get people added on here. Just got home from Arizona where I attended the AZPOST second annual Instructor Conference. It was great. We're going to have Ryan Clark, who works for AZPOST, is coming on to talk to us. He goes by the nom de guerre, Deliberate Concepts. And we're going to have our favorite little guy, Wild Bill Forster. And we'll have that cute and squishy, adorable little Jamie Gissel coming on next, I'm assuming. It's like, I'm very punchy because it's been a busy week, hasn't there, Ryan?
It has.
So real quick, while we're waiting for Jamie to get on, and so I don't sound like a blithering idiot any further than I am, why don't you give us an introduction to who you are, your background, and start telling us about what brought AZPOST into leading the nation when it comes to cobbling people together and trying to improve standards and training.
I don't know how true some of that is, but I appreciate the introduction. My name's Ryan Clark. I started law enforcement a little over 20 years ago in Michigan. Worked for a couple of different agencies, ended up getting laid off a couple of times. That's what brought me out to Phoenix. Joined a large metropolitan police department out here in Arizona and, spent a lot of time in patrol. The agency I was with was kind of having budget cuts shortly after the 2008, some of the changes to funding and all that. And we were kind of in a freeze, so to speak. So I wasn't able to move around a whole lot, but spent a lot of time in patrol, was trying to kind of train to go to something a little bit more exciting within the department. And then that training kind of led me to getting involved in the training unit and spent, I think, the last 5 years of my career in a full-time training unit. We trained all kinds of stuff from active shooter response to small team tactics, fighting in and around vehicles, DT, shooting, rifle, pistol, all that stuff. Throughout that time, I got into competitive shooting, kind of played around with USPSA and some accurized AR stuff and PRS, and got injured while I was on that training unit doing a temp with another unit at the department that I was looking to try to transfer to, and that kind of ended my career. And then kind of had some pretty good luck. Arizona Post ended up reaching out to me and offered me a position in their training unit to try to develop an active shooter response program for the state for recruit curriculum. So I jumped on board with them a little over 2 years ago and kind of just hit the ground running. And we just launched our second new proficiency, which is patrol tactics. And I've been traveling around, getting to know new people and expanding kind of my own circle, and ran into Jamie Gissel. We spent some time working together on some different things, and that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, so it's funny how the law enforcement instructor mafia consigliere Scott Howell had me on, introduced me to Jamie. Jamie brought me on to do his training evaluation, and after talking to him, he introduced me to you. Actually, it was before I took his class. He introduced me to you just from our conversations. You and I had a lot of conversations, found that common ground, and you had me come out and evaluate, just provide feedback on something that you're doing that has pissed off a lot of people, which is very good because if we're not pissing people off, are we really growing? As long as we're pissing off the right people, right? So I came out and you had me sit in with the patrol tactics. That's a new concept that I'd be willing to bet that a lot of agencies and academies and posts aren't considering. You guys are doing disruptive work. I evaluate academies. I see the stuff that they're doing. I get to read some of the lesson plans. Y'all are doing disruptive work, and that's what we need. And I think AZPOST is leading. I say that AZPOST is leading because you have a mandate to improve the quality of training and improve the quality of recruits coming out of training. And you're doing it. And you're upsetting people who aren't able to just play status quo. So if you can, I'd like you to talk a little bit about some of the growth that you've done, like changing the firearms program. That's huge. People for years have been talking about changing firearms programs, and they haven't. but primarily for firearms instructors. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, because I think that leads a lot into the first conference you had last year and pretty much what led you into this year's as well.
Yeah, and first and foremost, I think one of the things that makes all the changes possible is we've got really supportive leadership at Arizona Post. Without them kind of allowing us to make change and backing us when the complaints come in and the concerns come in, we just wouldn't be able to do any of this. So we're really fortunate, and I would say right now, because just in my experience, we probably won't always have that. Hopefully we do. With firearm stuff, there's a number of people working on that. I'm definitely involved, but Bob Pinkerton, one of my coworkers, right, he's definitely really leading the charge on the firearm stuff, so I don't want to take credit that isn't mine. But we're really trying to get away from, what we've always done, because what we keep changing words and moving things around, expecting different results, but we're not really changing the substance at all of what we're trying to accomplish. So we're really getting to performance-based shooting, and a lot of that comes from practical shooting training strategies, or what some people will call competitive shooting training strategies. It's just kind of the breakdown of how we introduce firearms, the classroom and PowerPoint stuff. A lot of that stuff's being trimmed way down so that we're putting more time on a range and we're doing more shooting, and it's more exploratory, where it's kind of like more of a coaching setup where we put people into drills that slowly introduce them to shooting, kind of like what you experienced this week.
Yeah.
And the coaches are kind of guiding you as to how you need to connect dots, because it's very difficult, especially shooting as an example, to like really teach somebody how to thoroughly like understand how to grip a weapon, right? So you teach them the principles and some of the concepts, and then you got to guide them through that process to try to figure out what works for them. And as long as we're getting the results we're looking for, then we just continue to double down on that, right? And I think that's really kind of the drive for the firearm stuff. And there's stuff that's been out there that I don't own at all, and kind of the push to kind of get away from the slow down and get your hit mentality and more to the performance on demand stuff. A big way to change that, though, and I think we can kind of get into this, is really trying to invest in the instructors and the skills that the instructors have, because they're kind of your force multiplier out there. And we're revamping the instructor school and going very much to a practical shooting approach to that. And I don't know where we're going to settle on this, but I think we'll end up changing what the requirements are to be a firearms instructor. There's now a pretty heavily graded teaching assessment, and then there's a shooting assessment that will be hit factor based that we're trying to move to, that should really encourage people to have to balance real performance between speed and accuracy, where previous assessments were really only accuracy, if we're being honest. And we're just seeing a better performance. We're on our 6th pilot program with that. Again, Bob Pinkerton's been leading that. And what we've seen from the instructors is there's no ceiling now to performance on what the assessment is. And when you explain hit factor to them, there's more layers to it, and they start chasing it more because it's just more interesting, I think, in general. And that has had a big impact, as you kind of saw, and I think as Josh Coleman from Calfia saw, get pretty good buy-in when you get guys stepping up to a line and performing in front of each other. And immediately guys that have been behind a gun professionally for a long time, they start to quickly pick up on things they've been doing wrong for a long time, but they've never been taught to shoot aggressively and kind of explore that. And so they've never put together the parts that are actually holding them back, because it's not speed, right?
Right. So one of the things that I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you changed up the patrol tactics, because in Virginia, patrol tactics means one thing, in Florida it means another, in Texas it means another, but the way y'all are doing it is a very different concept of how I went through in 2000 basic when they were doing patrol tactics. It was all, this is how you do this one niche thing, this is how you do this other one niche thing. It was just stacks of one niche things. And what y'all have done for your patrol tactics is pretty disruptive. I'm going to use that word a lot, because
Yeah.
I say disruptive because if everyone agreed with it, it isn't disrupting anything, and you have to wonder, is it really achieving anything if everyone's happy and slapping backs at the end of the day? It's like
Right.
the courses I deliver. If everyone says you did a great job, I immediately think I did not do a great job. I need to have some pushback. Of course, the pushback has to have value, and it can't be me actually saying what I said in class that people are going to say. and then say that in there. And, my post today illustrates that. But I think I'd like you to talk more about how you came about that patrol tactics redesign, because you were instrumental in, if not the lead, you were still instrumental in pushing that along and creating new concepts, right?
Yeah, I mean, like when I first jumped to post, my primary, I guess responsibility request was to get the active assailant program up and running, right? So we were pushing pretty hard on that, and I was given a pretty tight deadline. And that's where I met Jamie Gissel, and I think we had crossed paths before, but that's where we really kind of developed a friendship and found there's a lot of commonality between our belief systems, and he got on board with active assailant and really helped kind of push it out there. When the dust kind of settled from that, I was asked to because I had fresh eyes just leaving a training unit from a pretty big city, to look at the rest of the curriculum. And they go, what other areas do you think could be improved on, or should we add, and just kind of like a clean look. And I immediately said, I think the high-risk vehicle stop program needs to be changed a lot. So the discussions that kind of came from that is, my belief system has been for a long time that a lot of training we do in law enforcement is very template based, like it's like a skit or dance steps. It doesn't really teach people how to problem solve. And high-risk vehicle stops, and again, the work done by those guys was great for a lot of years, and I really credit those guys. And I did publicly when I did a presentation to the post board. They helped get us to kind of where we were at, but at some point things need to change, and we got to identify what worked and didn't. So they're very much responsible for us making this change, and I think some of them are hung up on this idea that we're just taking their work and discarding it. And that's really not the case. But with the high-risk vehicle stop is a compliant-based event, right? If the suspect doesn't show compliance and pull over for you, it never becomes a high-risk vehicle stop. If they pull over for you and they won't exit the vehicle, it's going to become a vehicle barricade. If they get out of the vehicle and they don't listen to you, it's going to be some kind of open area barricade. And the current program really didn't address any of those things. And when we look at the reality of high-risk vehicle stops, they really don't seem to be that high risk. We don't really get into that much use of force or significant issues from it. And as I traveled around for 2 years, and I'd ask guys, because I tried to be like a voice from post that's front and center that can like kill rumors and give guys, some pretty straightforward answers on stuff. And I'd ask them when we tell them what we're working on, how many of you guys have been like a significant use of force or a significant situation in a high-risk vehicle stop? And it does happen, but it's pretty rare if we're being honest. And there's a lot of other things we don't have any proficiencies built in that are far more risky or cause far more issues. And we didn't train guys really to do anything with that. So looking at that, looking at what a high-risk vehicle stop is at its core, it's a team tactic, right? So what we did is we just tried to take a step back and build a team tactics program that really focused on concepts and principles. And principles are like things that don't change. It's a truth, right? They're kind of like rules. And then the concepts are kind of like the general idea behind, different aspects of what our options are. So it's a general idea behind it. And that kind of creates guidelines for decision making. And that program focuses far more now on dealing with non-compliant based events, like open area barricades, things of that nature. And it really starts at a crawl, walk, run stance where we look at stuff like triangulation as opposed to these preset formations. We just explain the benefits and even the concerns that you can get from some of these things. So they're making educated decisions in real time based on what they have. And what we find is that when you train guys to deal with non-compliant based events and you look at stuff through the lens of concept and principle, it's far more applicable to more types of events. And guys don't get stuck in these templates that ultimately generally aren't the answer, because you just can't have enough templates to keep up with real life. The pushback we got, of course, is that people think we're now not preparing people for doing high-risk vehicle stops, which really isn't the case. It's just not the only focus of the program now.
Right.
Previously, the academies were getting 8 hours of high-risk vehicle stop training, and the instructor schools, I think, were like 40 hours for just a high-risk vehicle stop. And again, they really didn't address some of the stuff that could develop from that, or that might build the officers into being a little bit better tacticians. This is definitely opening up the floodgates to just basic team tactics all the way up to vehicle pins, vehicle-based barricades, open area barricades, and kind of the instance you can replicate and address with that is almost endless. It's kind of like the foundation now for teaching people how to actually apply tactics to problems.
Right.
Kind of stumbling onto the concept and principle thing. A guy you saw in July and saw at the conference, Dan, him and I were assigned to an academy class when we were working together, and I think we had about 7 to 8 hours to invest in team tactics with the recruits. It's something that my agency had always invested in, and that's not standard academy curriculum. That was extra stuff that that academy chose to do. And when we made kind of that investment, we had an opportunity with some downtime to kind of experiment a little bit with what the recruits were capable of dealing with when we didn't really give them this template, this box they had to work within. And we set up a high-risk vehicle stop, never teaching them how to do that. And we just told them, hey, use the team tactics we gave you. There's an actor in the car. He's going to try to take advantage of openings you give him, and just use what we taught you, and try to create apprehension from this, right? as safely as you can. And we watched recruits that had never been taught how to do a high-risk vehicle stop basically just invent the tactics they needed in the moment based on the concepts and the principles we gave them, and they just problem solved it the whole time. And what we noticed is as we moved them around the training venue that we had and put them in some kind of less than advantageous positions, they never really got hung up like guys that wanted to apply a template. They would just accept that certain things were available to them in the environment or certain things weren't. And then they would just essentially just do things that made sense tactically. And we put current police officers that were going through training through some of the same kind of drills or challenges, and they would get hung up because they were looking to do the rinse and repeat of some of the stuff that they had applied in the past. And that's kind of when I think some lights started to go off, at least in my mind. And I remember having one of those groups, we're teaching building search, and they're holding down on a suspect in a hallway. And rather than do it was the normal recruit thing, which would be to push past, their position and try to put hands on that individual, they would just call him back, and they were like, hey, let's just teach us an apprehension and team tactics. And they could see it for what it was and no longer it was a category based, tactic. And we just saw just better decision making across the board. And we've done the same thing with active assailant now, and it just tends to build better decision makers.
And that's the key. And that's one of the things that I think that I was gonna hone in on, if you hadn't said it, is that templates take the decision making out and leave people with, well, that's how I was trained, as opposed to articulating why they did the moves that they did, and describing the situations like, well, why didn't you move to the left? Because there was a 4-foot embankment into a ditch full of water. I couldn't move to the left. Or a template would be like, they would stall and think, how do I need to go this way. How am I going to navigate this 4-foot ditch with water in it? I guess I'm going to get wet or get bit by snakes or whatever.
Well, and rather than fix the problem, right, they're focusing on trying to execute a template, and they have the wrong priorities a lot of times, right? Like you're saying, for sure.
Yeah. Jamie, step in.
That's kind of one of the funny things about when I met Ryan. So I heard the AZPOST was going to take on active assailant, and I've been doing it for a long time, and I've been doing it a certain way for a long time. And when I heard AZPOST was getting involved with active assailant, I'm like, no. I have it a certain way. I hate alert. We all know that. I hate some of these other template-based type active shooter response. And I'm going to this course with, I don't know, Ryan can attest. Me and Mike Campbell kind of sat in the back of the class being like, okay, what are we here for? We don't want to be here. They're going to change all of our stuff. And AZPOST is going to screw this up. Right away, when Ryan started talking about, hey, this is a principle-based tactic, and it's not going to, each situation is a little bit different. So we're going to teach you some of the concepts behind what we want to do and then apply it. I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I want. I want to teach these officers how to be decision makers and not go off of, hey, you have to be in a diamond the entire time, or you have to do some T formation every time, because every situation is different. So right away, I gained respect from Ryan. I'm like, yep, I like this guy. We're going to work together on stuff. I'll continue to develop that active assailant program. And then as soon as I think he was even at one of those very first active assailant instructor schools that we put on, we started talking about the team tactics and how can we apply team tactics to patrol. And I already had a course that was team tactic based, and we were doing the same thing that Ryan was doing in his academy with the small team tactics type stuff that was getting away from the templates. And so right away we jumped in together and started creating all these, hey, if it works for a high risk vehicle stop, it can also work for an open air barricade. It can also work for a barricade. It can also work whether I'm behind a dumpster or whether I am using a tree as cover, right? Just help these officers become decision makers rather than live off a template. And so, yeah, since then, me and Ryan have been working on a bunch of different things and have the same mindset and philosophy that we need to now transfer to all officers in every type of training that we put on. Another thing that I will say about Ryan and what AZPOST is doing too, which is different than the majority of posts out there that I know, is he hit on instructor development, and that is huge. And I think too often we have too many instructors that have gone through instructor courses, get the cert, either never train it or they are stuck in the same way and aren't willing to evolve and go to other trainings and outside trainings and learn, right? Or they go to the instructor course, and because they took the 40-hour, 80-hour course, just for showing up, they get the cert. If you can't teach it, if you can't do it, you can't teach it. And we saw that right away with some of the active assailant courses and also with our patrol tactics instructor courses now. Like, if you can't do it, you can't teach it, you're not ready to be an instructor yet. So every one of our courses now, we're unfortunately but fortunately failing out people that shouldn't be instructors. It's not a show up to the course and get a certification because you showed up. You have to actually show proficiency in not only the task but also how to teach it as well. So that's something that I've really loved what Ryan's doing with AZPOST and some of the changes that they're making over there, because that will help our culture overall if we develop the instructors a little bit better.
So, and I think you hit on one key thing that I think would be most shocking for people hearing about how you're changing the firearms instructor course, how you're changing the patrol tactics into team tactics, is that people can fail this course. You can't just show up, get the cert, and consider yourself blessed into the fold of people who never change. If you can't pass, you can't teach. And and also the instructor development, I think, leads into the AZPOST conference thing. Let's talk about that real quick. Dextro's training group that's how it should be. Love it. Absolutely. The people who want the change want the standards. I want to know that there's a risk that if I don't perform, I don't get the cert. Anything that's given to me is absolutely suspect, unless it's a tasty block of dates that a friend gives me in Palestine. I'm not gonna reject that. But as far as training and certificates, I have to earn that thing, or I can't respect it. I worked. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just gonna keep rambling. So.
Yeah, I'm not really the guy that's necessarily going to be teaching this stuff all the time. I'm kind of the guy trying to find the guys that I can rely on to teach it, right, all around the state. And that's a challenge. But I try to go to all of the first courses, at least day one, if I can make them all, and really kind of shoulder that, where as post, I just try to get up in front of the class for a few minutes, and I just let them know. And some of this I steal from Palmer, the phrase of this, but I tell them this is not a seminar, this is an instructor school, and there's a standard here we're going to hold you to. And if you can't put points on the board, then you're going to have to come back when you're ready. And then I generally tell them, and it's the truth, between active assailant and patrol tactics, which is our newer course, we're generally failing 2 to 3 people in a 15-person, 12 to 15-person class size. And the feedback I've gotten from guys when they see us dismiss students is generally that they're shocked, especially with the post course, and that they really appreciate us holding a standard. And I honestly think that helped get interest from the guys we want to be involved in programs, because they felt like it wasn't handed out anymore. Yeah. They felt like maybe because there's an added element that it's more difficult. The guys that want challenges, that are always trying to push their own limits, they're more interested in being a part of the stuff that Post is putting on. And that's been really important for us to improve in the future.
Yeah. And I will say, one of the instructors who pushes this a lot is on the call today. I'm not going to call that person out because I don't know they want their name associated with law enforcement stuff on Instagram, protect privacy and all that. But the instructors that they had, I went through the patrol tactics yesterday morning. That was my one morning class. I was able to attend the whole thing. They are freaking outstanding, absolutely locked on. This one instructor led the entire 3-hour block, freaking crushed it. Knew exactly what they were talking about, had the command presence, the confidence, was able to, delivered critique directly, professionally. It was very inspiring, and each one of the instructors, I want to call their names out, but I also want to protect their privacy if they don't want to be world known. They absolutely dialed in and represent what you're trying to accomplish so absolutely well. You couldn't have chosen better instructors to push this message.
I agree, and honestly, and Jamie's one of them, right?
Yeah, and Jamie. Yeah, and Jamie.
It's honestly, it's been kind of a whirlwind, to a degree. And I used to have, a 20 plus person training cadre that I could lean on. And when I went to post, it's not that I wasn't alone, but I didn't have that anymore. So building relationships and finding good people to help push this stuff out was really important. And last week I was in Tucson for a patrol tactics instructor course, and I'm just kind of sitting there, and I don't know why it kind of came over my mind, but I'm sitting there thinking about all of the active assailant instructors that we graduated, that are teaching this all over the state for over a year now. The patrol tactics instructors we had just recently put through since July, and there's somewhere over 300 instructors now. Oops, lost my earbud here. There's somewhere over 300 instructors that are pushing curriculum that I had a lot of ownership in, and it's pretty humbling to have people like who you experience at the conference behind this, and just a lot of guys across the state. It's a pretty cool experience for me.
Yeah, and it goes to that.
I think that's it.
No, go ahead.
Oh,
Go
go ahead.
ahead.
I was gonna say, like, because Ryan has been willing to raise the standard for instructors, it has brought way more quality instructors in. Guys that wouldn't have wanted to been part of it before are now wanting to be a part of it because they see the higher standard and they know that, hey, if we're raising the standard, I want to be part of that. And I think that goes with all aspects of law enforcement. We talk about raising the standard for shooting. We talk about raising the standard for
Yep.
our officers in general. The more we do raise our standard, we're going to rise to that occasion. You're going to get better instructors, you're going to get better officers, you're going to get better teachers, and all that stuff. And yeah, so I commend Ryan for really, really pushing that and making that happen.
And that's almost what I was going to say, is that it proves the point that we say on almost every one of these Let's Talk Lives, is that high performers want to work with high performers. If they see that not everybody can get a cert, that makes them interested. Is like, oh, there are people who are passing this and failing it. If they're failing it, that means that the people who are passing are going to be a different set of people. And now I want to know who those people are, and I want to be associated with them. I don't want to be associated with the turds. I'm perfectly fine with the turds floating away. I want to be associated with people like y'all. And I was thinking about this on my flight home. It's just how amazing the circle has gotten, how we've all found each other. Us, the hard charging, we want higher standards, we want to be with the other high performers, and it's happening. It's happening, and that's one of the things that I got before I go into the AZPOST thing. Bill's just sitting there looking pretty. Do you have any questions, Matt?
I do have a question, and it's kind of going back a little bit, but it's in regards to when you were talking about the principles and concepts that you guys were developing for the team tactics portion of the. I'm assuming that's replacing the high risk vehicle stop curriculum, is the team tactics specific stuff.
Correct.
When you guys developed those principles and concepts on that, what did that development look like? Because I'm assuming that you had your HRVS, content, and you were running that, and then you went out to the agencies and were like, hey, what are you guys seeing? And you found some gaps. And then I'm just curious, as far as like from discovering those gaps to establishing those principles and concepts that sound like they apply across a wide range of things. What did that process look like for you guys discovering that?
So I missed a little bit of your question, I think, Bill. So just if I missed something on the answer, let me know. But I think I got the gist of it.
Okay.
A lot of the team tactics stuff was really set in place previously just by my agency And a lot of it got refined when we started to really build a heavy 40 millimeter program and pepper ball program.
Okay.
And that stuff was kind of already out there, but wasn't really widely taught to patrol in the depth that it is now. And I want to say right around 2018 is when I really started to get introduced to how to teach and or train with concepts and principles, right? Before, I think I was still very much in this dance step mode. And it wasn't until I started to understand that I think I started to break away from those restrictions. And then I think I started to have more effectiveness as an instructor and as a decision maker. But I think some of the development as we collaborated with other agencies, we found that we were kind of just putting names on stuff that we were all trying to name, right? To make it more of a standard approach to teaching. And that stuff had been vetted long before I got there. We just kind of refreshed it. And then my job for the post thing was to try to find language where it would all fit together at the state level. And it wasn't just my agency's version of it, right? Or trying to get away from that. Does that answer all your question? I don't know if I missed some parts of it.
No, that makes sense. I was just curious how you got to that point, but that makes sense.
Yeah, and some of the concepts, I can just throw some stuff out there that might help add some layers to it. But safety priorities really dictate the tempo of everything we're involved in, right? And we used to call those priorities of life. We went more into the safety priority part just because that generally made instructors cover more of the why people are where they're at, because it's not just a list that's arbitrary, right? I think most people are familiar with that, but we really try to dive into every call you go to. You should be identifying what your safety priorities are, and then your decision should be following that, right? And then some of the concepts would be time, distance, cover, or time, distance, shielding, right? And again, that'll be very much affected by your safety priorities, how that can affect decision making and some of the advantages. Rather than getting into formations or positions, we just taught triangulation as a concept. What is it? When does it benefit us? When does it maybe make things more difficult? Can you have too much of it? We just thoroughly explore that through both, a short lecture, but then some drilling, which is pretty basic stuff. And then we'll get into stuff like contingency planning has always been a thing. But when you say that to people, a lot of people just get lost in the sauce, right? And they try to come up with a response for everything. And we really just tell them, start at your worst case scenario and work backwards. But we also try to categorize it. So we call it ABC planning. And your C plan is worst case scenario, usually involving lethal force or protection of a third party, right? And because that's the most costly, we start with that plan first. And all of these plans usually have some things in common. So even if you only get one out, you're already further along, even if you have to go to a different type of event. But your A plan is best case scenario. It's how are we going to create custody from this? If he does what we tell him to do, where are we taking him in custody? Who's putting hands on him? Are we going to him? Are we calling him to us? Stuff like that. Then your B plan is kind of all the intermediate stuff, right? Usually involving lethal force or some way that we're going to convince this guy to be nice or to cooperate or create an opportunity or a change in behavior. And we work backwards in that. We'll build scenarios where we have multiple outcomes. And this came from the instructor that Rick was talking about that he saw teach yesterday. We're not bringing her name up, but yeah, she did a phenomenal job. And she kind of came up with this thing from my old agency, which was ABC scenarios. And you'll find a basic scenario where you could fit in multiple outcomes, and you'll give the officer or recruit maybe 30 to 60 seconds at the beginning with some information. And then you'll call out, conclusion one or option one, and the actor will perform it. And then the officers will react. And then there'll be a quick reset, and it'll be option two. And we'll see how many, we might have 3 or 4 different outcomes for them. And we'll see how many plans fit those outcomes and whether they did their job to kind of get ahead of stuff, to no longer be as reactive and be more ahead of the game and making decisions to get in front of problems. So that's a whole concept in and of itself, right? And then ARC, action, reaction, counteraction, and just kind of that chain of events, how things can cause those things. And a lot of times we create the compressed timelines we work within, right? We're looking for being aware of some of the stuff that we can cause. And if we don't need to compress it, maybe we need to wait for more resources, things like that. But we preload all that. And then those are their guidelines to solve problems.
That's dude, that's so cool to hear, because it reminds me of it sounds like Rick and I have talked about this before, but you guys are at the point which it sounds like you're establishing doctrine, because when we start to see like concepts and things that are applied across a wide range of things in the job and they're working, like that is like in the military or anyways, that's how we like proving that these concepts are applicable. And one thing that I just thought of was like by doing that, you know, when we were in the template based training format, because we did the same thing, you know, a lot of times guys like, oh, we have to train HRVS. We get 8 hours once a year. That's not enough time. But when you break down things like the way you guys are doing it, every call that those guys go on is a rep executing those concepts
Yes.
and principles in real time, which is a way to produce training good habits and behavior. And that's phenomenal, man. I can't say enough good things about it. I'm glad to hear that you guys are doing that.
I appreciate it. Well,
That's one
one
of
of
the
the,
cool things too. Just another way that we're getting more of those reps in is exactly that ABC planning, keeping the scenarios the same, and then just changing the outcome. Because too often instructors develop these big drawn out scenarios and then they do them and then, okay, we're going to move on to the next scenario. And then they have to reset and they have to plan and they have to tell the actors what to do. But if you do it the way that we're trying to do it in the patrol tactics program, it's the same scenario. Now let's just change the outcome because instead of them going left, they went right. And now it's a whole different scenario and we can reset it. And now they're getting rep after rep after rep rather than repping it out once and then debriefing and then waiting. And then you just get more practice doing it. And just like you said, Bill, it doesn't matter if it's a high risk vehicle stop or a barricaded building, you're getting the same rep over and over again because it's the same concepts.
Dude, that's awesome.
in that patrol tactics curriculum in the instructor school, I guess I should say, we put a lot of time into really trying to change some mindsets on training approaches, right? And kind of getting more into stuff that Rick, that Melpass will talk about with representative training and putting people in environments where it focuses on the reps. They might be all similar. And I mean, anybody that's been doing this for a while knows that you can add one layer to a scenario, especially for maybe a patrol guy that doesn't have a ton of experience yet or a recruit, and it's a whole new experience for them. And you don't have to like come out of left field all the time. And I'm a big advocate on when we're building and just repping stuff out to let recruits or officers watch others go through the scenario. And we might have 2 or 3 different outcomes. And you got other variables you can always just throw in there to change it if they need more challenges. But they'll watch people succeed and fail, and they'll learn from just seeing that, right? And as things adjust, as things change, you just adjust it, and you can get a lot of work out of that without moving vehicles, without adding a whole bunch of actors. And I think that was one of the takeaways we read in the reviews from the patrol tactic intro at the conference. Was guys were noting there's only like 3 or 4 of my instructors doing the course, and there's a class of 14 to 15. And people were going through about 4 to 5 scenarios, I think, in an hour. And that's between 15 people. And one of the instructors is an actor, or they're rotating out of, through the actor part. So you can get a lot of work done. And when you get guys that are putting hands on this stuff a lot, I just think you get a better outcome in capability, right? And understanding.
Absolutely. And that I thought it was really helpful too, because while I was taking the patrol tactics class yesterday morning, I could tell there were a lot of people that were going through it because they were weighing it. They were like, "Is this really what it is?" You could see the skepticism at the very beginning. Some of the people I went through didn't want to step up and take charge. I'm like, I'm not the cop now. Y'all are still cops. You need to do the talking. You need to do the stuff. But by the end of it, you could see a lot of people nodding their heads like, yeah, this was awesome. So I think that's one of the things that I think is a power in your conference.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I'd like to talk about, where did the conference idea come from? What led you between year 1 and year 2 to make changes, and where would you like to see this thing go in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So, like stepping back, when I retired and then went to post, I did the active shooter, active assailant thing for a little bit. And while doing that, I'm traveling around a lot. I'm meeting a bunch of different instructors. I'm seeing some really good examples of high quality instructors doing a lot with curriculum that I think could be revamped, right? And I saw some instructors that I, thought, were really lacking in some areas by their approach. And and just taking note of different things. And as I was traveling around, I'm seeing academies that are doing stuff at a really high level, higher level than our academy was, stuff that I really appreciated. And it was pretty short order that I started to know that this agency, because we have 17 academies in the state, right? And somewhere around 160 agencies. So I'm making all these contacts all around the state. And my world in law enforcement really opened up compared to just my agency. And I started knowing that these guys are trying to fix this problem, and these guys did that a couple of years ago. And before I know it, I'm an intermediary to be a networking tool for people, where I'm just hooking people up with each other all around the state to borrow curriculum or learn about some of the failures they had doing this, and just trying to help guys get ahead of stuff. And some takeaways I had was how important instructor development was, how important I think the networking is, because there's solutions to a lot of guys' problems out there that they're just not talking, and there's no real way for them to talk. They're on other sides of the state. And then the part you're alluding to, Rick, which is when you get instructors into a room and there's no need or drive to perform on demand, you tend to get a lot of ego-driven discussions. And the best way to defeat that, I find, is put them on a firing line and tell them to show you why they can do it better than you can, right? And that's a shooting angle, but people tend to quiet down pretty quickly when they've got a guy, at a grandmaster level pistol shooting skill level, right? And you're going to argue with them. You're going to need to be able to demonstrate what you're talking about at a pretty high level to get your peers that are watching you now buy in on it. And that tends to keep people pretty quiet that don't have the confidence or the skills they really think they do. And the same thing happens in scenarios. There's a lot of instructors that need to jump into that student route or realm more often. And I think you can very much start to buy into this fantasy you'll create in your mind that you can just solve any problem, but then you're used to knowing the needed outcome in a scenario because you're running the same thing over and over and over again. You take a guy that's teaching stuff a lot and you put him in something like patrol tactics, and you introduce some basic concepts to them, and you have them do scenarios, and sometimes they just fall on their face and some pretty easy stuff. They tend to it tends to just bring us to a good starting point to just have honest discussions. And I thought all of that could be accomplished in the conference. And previously, I think we had done some symposiums before, is what they called them, but I think they were very proficiency based, and it wasn't just a blanket for instructors across the board. And in talking to the team about this idea, my stance kind of was, I think we need to get all of these guys together because it needs to all kind of fit everybody's, intent. Firearm stuff should match what's happening with tactics and the stuff all needs to blend together. And I need a guy in patrol tactics to watch people, put people in some sort of a control hold to create custody. And I need the patrol tactics guys to know that, hey, that's an approved DT approach, right? Whatever it needs to be, and or it isn't. And we need to get our combatives guys out here next time to monitor this to make sure that what they're teaching is working, it's being used.
I have no idea what just happened, y'all. Apparently Instagram did not like me talking anymore and shut us down. So I've started back up, hoping that everyone will come back on. I have no idea why it just shut itself off. It was pretty freaking weird. So it was really bizarre. I am not pleased with that. Maybe my phone's too hot. I don't know. I don't know what happened, dude. Just Instagram said, nope, you're done. Well, we've gone an hour and a half before, never had this kind of thing. But sorry about that, everybody. I know everyone was on the edge of their seat. What is Rick going to say next? He's spoken so little in this conversation. But I think so. My experience being a teacher being an instructor at this conference, I thought y'all did really well. I thought it was well structured. 3 hours is really kind of difficult to push stuff into. That's probably the biggest complaint that people had with mine was that there just wasn't enough time. But I was hearing that about all this stuff. Everyone, you start getting into that rhythm, and by the time you get to an hour and a half, 2 hours, you're like, all right, it's clicking. All right, you're done. Have a good day. And it was like, but what? So, you were at the end of one of my classes on Wednesday. I think it was the morning class. And people sat there. When I said, okay, it's 11 o'clock, we're going to lunch. They're looking like, what? We're done? So I don't know if other classes have that issue, but I think doing the half day, full day thing is a really good idea. I was also thinking, from having been an instructor in law enforcement with a regulatory body that was constantly telling us what to do, it always felt like ivory towers talking down to instructors saying, "Hey, you peasants below, these are the requirements now." I think that maybe having like a round table or having like maybe one of the keynotes is the future for the next year or the strategic plan for what we want to accomplish, and invite people to chime in, create working groups. These are the 5 projects we're working on over the next 3 years. Anybody who wants to be a part of this, wants to have feedback, wants to contribute, here's our email address, please reach out. Maybe having some tabletops where people who have different philosophies on the same topic can hash it out before a crowd, and the crowd can ask questions. It's like, well, what do you think about this? Make sure that nobody brings any fruit or rotten tomatoes in there so it doesn't turn into a giant food fight. But I think because you guys are doing something brand new, you really have an awesome opportunity to do stuff that's not being done in other conferences that might not work because other conferences are like 1,000 attendees or 500 attendees.
Right.
So
One of the things I
Ideas,
liked
Rick.
about the way the conference was set up, one of those things I liked about the way the conference was set up is because the breakout sessions were a bunch of different scenarios.
he says he speaks for a total
Posts
of 12
are
minutes and
you
now
got to
his
get their
phone
feet.
cuts out.
Can
Yeah,
you
your
hear me
phone
now?
cut out just as you started talking. It's like he's been
Ah,
sitting here for
damn it!
40 minutes just listening, and now he starts to talk and the phone craps.
Waiting to say something.
Yeah.
No, like one of the things I liked about the way the conference is set up too is each. So I helped out with the patrol tactics on the first day, right? And you got to listen to other people's feedback. You got to listen to what other people's ideas were in between scenarios. And I actually learned a lot from some of the other people from smaller agencies, what they were doing, and to really get their feedback. You talked about a roundtable. Like we really got to get their feedback on that one specific thing in those breakout sessions. Because I've been to other conferences before where you just sit and listen to somebody talk the entire time. Where this, we actually got to do stuff. And then I helped out with the police jiu-jitsu portion of it on the last day. And we got to sit and have a discussion with all the other people. What are you facing in your agency? And what are you changes you want to see? And you got to have real discussions with the people in each one of those groups. So I like the roundtable idea, but the breakout sessions, the way we did it, you still got to have that roundtable session with each one of the groups that you were with. And even in
Yeah.
your class, Rick, we had lots of good discussion in that classroom setting with what people were facing, what they were seeing, changes that they wanted to make in their agency. And I think breaking it out like that, you did get a lot of that roundtable discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we can adjust. I think next week we'll look at all the reviews. We're going to send them all to you guys that helped contribute to, the instruction, so you guys have some of that, and then we'll sit down and start trying to hash out what next year needs to look like to make it better. Yeah, I mean, I've got high hopes this will be something we'll continue, and I think we will. I think our director, deputy director, from what I've been told, we're pretty happy with the feedback they were getting, and felt like it really offered a lot of value to to our community. So
What was the final count on the number of instructors who showed?
I don't have a final count. I could get that for you, but I think we're in like the mid 60s.
The Monday morning, I counted about 68 out of 100 invited.
Right.
Yeah,
You
and I
know, that
think
there were several people that were at the first day or that weren't at the first day that were at the other 3 days.
Yeah,
So it was kind of hit and miss on those numbers. So I think probably overall, probably well over 70 or 80, I'm
yeah.
guessing.
I think that's a good size, honestly.
in 2 days we had 105 sign up for the conference, right? And I think our goal is to make it bigger, but again, get more agency involvement, because we don't want to put it all on the agency we've been relying on, and they're fantastic, but we don't want to overtax people, right? And so I'm thinking that, but we also had a pretty crazy week the week before the conference in the Valley with a lot of law enforcement, critical incidents, and I think we lost some people on showing up just because they were involved in the incidents, and then
Yeah,
some of their teammates and stuff, rightly so, didn't make the conference just because of all that stuff. So who knows where it might have been? Might have had a few more, but yeah, it's probably 65 to 70, which is pretty fair.
yeah. That's great. Honestly, I like the smaller conferences. You know, and one thing that would have been cool is having like you know, I don't want to say catered lunch essentially, but something that would have brought everybody together, give them opportunity to just talk and, you know, interact more than, because when you're with patrol tactics, the groups who got together, they would be able to sit and talk to each other, but then the different teams didn't talk to each other, you know, or you had like one team was all DPS, one team was all, you know, Healy County or something like that. And so it didn't provide a lot of the networking opportunity. And I think that's one of the powers that could come out of this is creating an opportunity where people have a chance to talk about something or, you know, I don't know. There's different things, but overall, I really enjoyed it, and I think you pulled a lot of really great names and had a lot of really great instructors there, and really demonstrated. Apparently, I'm gonna use the word "really" a lot, so I'm really excited about using the word "really." But yeah,
We got a lot of talent out here, and it's nice to give those guys a chance to kind of showcase stuff that they're passionate about or that they've been working on for a while and share that with others. And yeah, I think the feedback from the first year was kind of reoriented a lot of people's training programs to account for some stuff they hadn't thought of yet. And again, some of these things are already out there, and you got agencies that are like, here's my lesson plan, here's my number, these are the heartaches we had, this is the equipment you need. Like, they'll get you way ahead of the game rather than having to start from scratch.
yeah,
And that's kind of the hope, right?
it was a great showcase of what's available and what's to come. I think. You got anything to add, Bill?
I'm just soaking up a lot. I'm learning a lot. I mean, the first time I talked to Ryan, it was like an hour and a half on the phone. He didn't even know who I was. But yeah, it's really good to see what you guys are doing, and it's cool to be able to talk to you. And I wrote a shit ton of stuff down, so thank you for that. So I'm doing a lot more listening today than I am talking. But I did want to make a comment, and it's kind of just like commending on some of the things that you guys are doing. And I use the military as an example a lot because it was the one thing that I did find from it is that the school and the instruction side of it was actually the best that I've had outside of some private institutions, and it was immensely better than most law enforcement stuff. What you guys are doing with that, raising the standards for instructors, and like I'm sure you'll start to see it because it sounds like it's a new progress or process for you guys. But what we saw in the military with that is when you start to do that, the second and third order effects is actually kind of what starts to change the culture. And you know, for example, like if a unit is going to send somebody to an instructor class, and every school in the military, at least from the Marine Corps, was like that. You know, you can fail it. They're not going to send the shitbag. They're not going to send the guy that's just the favorite guy in the PD whose cousin is the chief, or you know, they
Yeah.
can't, because now it's the department's reputation on the line for who are you sending to this class, and if they come back without a cert, now it's a waste of their time, the department's time, maybe not their time, but the department's time, and they're going to look at it as loss. So by you guys doing that, you know, you're forcing the departments to invest in the people that are competent and capable of being good instructors, because those instructors, when they're going back to the PDs, them and the FTOs have the most influence over everything that happens. And even the FTOs need to go to an FTO school. So by doing that one thing with the instructors, raising that standard, and I'm assuming that it'll start to trickle into all of the other aspects of police teaching. Like, dude, that is so awesome. And I don't think there's a better way. You know, everyone talks about change the culture, change the culture, change the culture, but nobody's doing anything that affects it. And this, like, at its core, is significantly going to change the culture, obviously for you guys, but then everyone's going to start to look at what's Arizona doing. Because I haven't heard of another place that's doing anything like this.
Yep.
So you guys are at the forefront of it. So I just can't like say enough good things about it. And I'm sure you guys are going to reap the benefits of it like pretty quickly.
I appreciate it, man. And again, this is going to probably sound like I'm blowing smoke, but I mean, we really have so much support at Post to do this stuff. And I mean, we all know, like, if your leadership isn't behind it, like, you're just going to get shut down.
Yeah.
And I have yet to work for a place that takes my opinion more seriously than Arizona Post at this point. So, and we're kind of looking at, and this is future stuff, I don't know what'll happen with it, but we've had discussions on trying to create a mentor program where you won't get certified anymore in an instructor school. You'll be certifiable, and you'll have to work with an instructor and get some things signed off to show that you've proven proficiency in doing the thing more than just a school can show. But for right now, trying to track that data would be difficult for us. We need a system in place to do that. But that's kind of where I hope it'll go in the future.
Like an
That's awesome.
apprenticeship type program type thing.
Yep. Yeah. Like if you're firearms, a firearms instructor, you're going to have to like legitimately teach in an academy and maybe teach every aspect of the curriculum within a year, or hit certain benchmarks. And then you'll have somebody sign off and go, hey, he's completed whatever. Almost like an FTO program for instructors.
That's awesome.
That's what I was talking about in my class on Wednesday, is creating a program like that, because that's what the military does. But at least they do in the specialized schoolhouses, that you're not allowed to stand in front of somebody until you've signed off. You've been signed off by another instructor that, yeah, you've got the skills, you got this down, and you're staying within doctrine.
And that's where I want it to go. But again, it's got to be progressive. We got to have things in place to make that work.
Yeah.
Because those are some big jumps. But one of the challenges I think we have, and I don't know if other states are having this, is, we have a lot of guys that go to an instructor school for the training benefits, for like a resume and training hours that might, give them credit at work. And just, they're not really there with the intent on becoming an instructor and teaching. Mm-hmm. And when we make, hundreds of instructors in different proficiencies every year, but we're struggling to get people to teach at an academy, there's a disconnect there, and something we got to fix. And I think if you went to a mentorship program, it would put more emphasis on the guys that are really serious about it.
Yeah.
So those are some things we're just talking about. We'll see what happens with it.
That's awesome.
We have that exact problem that you just talked about. Nobody wants to teach at the academy.
Well, the people you do get that want to teach are people you don't really want to teach.
Correct. Yeah, that's accurate.
Guys,
yeah.
This is my ego, and look at me, I'm raising up the next generation of turds just like me.
Or they just want to go scream and yell at the recruits.
Yeah,
that too.
Instead of actually teach them.
Yeah, bully.
I'm kind of stepping back, but I am excited about the firearms program and stuff Pinkerton is doing, because it's just, the discussions have caused some people to get concerned, because raising the skill level on the guys that are going to be teaching firearms definitely has caused, concern. And people, I think, don't like the idea that the bar might be higher than they think they can obtain. And I feel like, from what I've been hearing, it's been pushing people to go train, shoot this assessment that they're going to be tasked with shooting, because it's hit factor based. And if you can't really balance your performance, I think it's pushing people to do the right things and maybe get reinvested if they want to stay where they're at. Because in my mind, you need to be really good at doing the thing that you're teaching, and you need to be good at teaching the thing, right? Yeah. To stand, especially in front of recruits, because the damage a bad instructor can do can be really hard to reverse, if at all. So that, we're looking at anything we can to kind of influence that, I think.
It's awesome. So we haven't had any questions from the group of people who are listening in. If anybody has any questions, please post them up, or we're going to be closing down here real shortly. Anybody have any last statements they'd like to make?
You guys giving me an opportunity to come just share some stuff we've been working on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Ryan. This is awesome.
We've been looking forward to having you on, and we're super grateful to your AZPOST bosses for allowing you to come on and represent Post. I think it makes it that much better that you have that transparency, and it shows the mandate that they're giving you to make change, is that they're not afraid of what you're going to say. Yeah. So that's great.
They're very supportive, and I can't complain about that side of this at all, for sure.
Anything you want to add, Jamie? You're the last voice.
It's been really good and refreshing working with Ryan the last couple of years and seeing the changes that they make. And if it wasn't for him and Pink and some of the other people that are over at AZPost right now, like, there's no way that I would want to be over there soon. So hopefully, I'm make the announcement now. I'll be starting over there with Ryan here in April. So making the jump to AZPost and hope continue to make the push that they're making. And if anybody has any questions on what they're doing, reach out. Ryan's always a phone call away, willing to talk to anybody. I'm willing to talk to anybody. If we can raise the standard from Arizona, we want to help raise the standard all around the country as well.
We got a question in. That was a very good ending. I'm sorry that we have to step on it with a question. The Jack Bear So who has the best law enforcement training academy in the United States? Why? What set them apart? So I actually have an answer for that. It's probably not a satisfactory answer, but I have an answer for who the best academy is. And it's based on the IADList Academy accreditation standards that we do. But there's standards of maintaining policy, having certain things in place. You can go to the IADList website and look at the 56 standards that an academy has to meet. The highest scoring academy in the United States is the Washington State Vancouver campus, has the highest score of any other academy in the world right now. They're technically the best according to the IADList accreditation, academy accreditation system. So as far as who has the best training, I think every academy thinks they have the best training.
I will say, being partial to Mesa's academy, and Ryan can jump in on this. We have it pretty good in Mesa and Progressive, and continue to push with a lot of really good instructors that are always pushing the limits. So we have it pretty good where I'm at.
Mongo556 says HCTA and Flagstaff is the best. I'm sure it's a completely objective, third-party, independent perspective too.
Yeah, Mesa does a great job, and High Country does a great job also.
I've been really impressed with the Mesa training. Seeing what they do, they use ISR matrix as their basis for DT, which I don't even think we really call it DT, right? What do you call it now? Police jujitsu.
Yeah, police jiu-jitsu.
Police jujitsu.
Defensive tactics, apprehension, police apprehension.
Yep. So I got to watch Luis Gutierrez demonstrate, and I was just so shocked and amazed. And I was thinking, if I had this when I was a recruit, I wouldn't have been medically retired, because it was a defensive tactics instructor course that got me medically retired, because we were doing PPTC. So it's, if we were doing what he was doing, I wouldn't have had a blown out disc in my neck. I might have broken something else, but it's just seeing how simple it is and how fast people could pick up on it. I think it's definitely a wave of the future when it comes to hand-to-hand combatives. There was another question: who would be doing the final checkoffs on the new standards if Ryan gets it going?
New standards. Are we talking like the mentorship program we're talking about, or what? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, Craig, we asked it. I'm going to see if he follows up.
I wonder if he's talking about like the firearm stuff.
Who would be doing final checkoffs on the new standards if Ryan gets it going? Mentor.
Mentor.
So I think what we would try to do is it would either be instructor or master instructor. I don't know. That's kind of what that discussion needs to kind of come up with. I think the biggest thing we're trying to figure out is how can we track all that stuff and retain it, because we also don't want it to be too cumbersome for guys at agencies that are trying to do their daily gig. If they're sending us stuff, stuff gets lost and misplaced. So we're trying to come up with a system, I think, where maybe they could log in and that stuff can get documented appropriately. So I would think instructor or master instructor.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, don't have any other questions popping in. So appreciate y'all coming on. Appreciate Jamie coming on as he's trucking down to Tucson to watch his son kick some tail tonight in soccer, right?
Yep, and playoff soccer game.
Outstanding. But we did get another one. What do you think the appropriate amount of time is before an instructor needs recertification? Me personally, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I think it depends on how much they're teaching. It's the break in teaching, I think, that can be a problem. But I think you're better to answer that, Rick. Please.
So I think there's a couple different answers to that. Because number one is you have the administrative side, then you have the professional development side, and then you have just skill set, knowledge set, maintenance side, right? So the administrative side is policy. You can set a policy that requires people to renew their certifications or have continuing education of a certain amount. Like in Virginia, every 2 to 3 years, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 years, but you had to get some instructor development training of at least 20 hours, which, they never dictated what it was. It was just like, you need to do something instructor-ish. They also required you to teach, you had to teach a class before you got your cert. So Virginia was already doing that. You were certifiable, like you said, And once you did a 4-hour block somewhere, you had an instructor sign you off, then you got your certificate. And there are people who never followed through with that, never got their certificate. I got mine done like within 2 days because I was motivated and excited. So you have the administrative side about time. But one of the things I struggle with, and it's a big paradigm struggle I have, is I hate putting time limits on things, because it's that we talk about this a lot. Somebody saying they have 5 years experience doing a thing varies differently. If I had 5 years working in a small town that had like maybe 2 robberies a year, my 5 years experience is not going to be the same 5 years experience as somebody who worked a gang infested high crime area. 5 years in law enforcement could be working a desk for 4.5 of them because you went on light duty for the rest of your life, or 5 years of working the worst side of NYPD or LA. So putting an amount of time on things, I think, is problematic because the time doesn't really matter. But I think that if you're going to use time, it can't be based on a qualitative factor. It has to be you have 2 years to accomplish something, not 2 years of having done something. So you have 2 years to go to bona fide instructor development courses. And that's like going to, if you're a firearms instructor development is going to other people's firearms courses, going to international courses, getting additional certificates, getting, developing your skill set and your knowledge set. But it has to be coupled with also, you have to teach at least 3 courses a year or 4 courses a year. There has to be some kind of standard involved in that. And then I would say that if you have to have a time stamp on it, I think that a firearms instructor, just like a regular cop, should qualify every year to keep their cert. I think a firearms instructor, you have to qualify every year, just like everybody else on the range has to qualify to keep their spot on the road. So if there's going to be time establishment, I'd like to make it more of like of a proficiency, but I don't know how you could do that without doing regular testing. And maybe that's what it is every year you have to qualify to keep your firearms instructor cert. What do you think, Ryan? You were going to say something before I stomped on it.
No, I just, to me, it just depends on how much you're teaching. I know at Post, we see a lot of guys that they may go a year or 2 without teaching because they're not a part of a full-time training detail. And but I like the idea of some sort of yearly requirement, at least from a development standpoint. I think that's a great idea.
I was kind of thinking that that's part of what you could probably do with your conferences too, is have the specialized, okay, everyone who's gone through the new firearms instructor course, every year at your conference, you're going to set aside a block where everybody just talks about their experiences, their knowledges, their gaps, what they're seeing in the gaps and trends that they're seeing with people coming on the line, that kind of thing, and use that as part of your maintenance cycle for the program. You can do that with all the programs that you're developing.
That's a good idea.
That's all I got. I hope I answered the question. I don't think it was a very satisfying answer, but
I think it was good.
I think
it's kind of great.
Yeah.
All right, boys.
Sounds great. Can we stop talking about it and get off the phone now?
Yeah. Good to see you guys. Good to talk to you, Ryan. We'll see you guys next time.
All right.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks,
care.
Ryan.
Be safe. Take care.
See you, bye.